Okay, let's get to it. Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today what we are going to be talking about is another tour of my nonfiction bookshelves. This might be the last tour or the next to last. I have another section of books that I haven't made up my mind if I'm going to talk about or not. Yeah. Anyway, this section has what I call miscellaneous. They're nonfiction books that I have in certain categories, but they're like so few within these categories that I figured I'll just group them all together. So yeah, if that makes any sense at all. You haven't been around that much. A few months ago I decided to start doing this nonfiction tour, basically, where I would talk about some of the books on my nonfiction shelves, whether I've read them, haven't read them yet, and just talk slightly more in depth about those books, because I find nonfiction to be really interesting. I think that, you know, people can be into all different kinds of fiction things, but I think nonfiction is the most interesting to me because it's like, this is real life stuff and real life things that people are, or people that, you know, everyone might be interested in. And I know I have a lot of varying topics and people that I am interested in, and I always find it fun and maybe a little bit revealing when I go to other people's houses and see what kind of nonfiction they read, if they don't read any at all. Just kind of learn a little bit more about someone's like interests, which is especially nice if you're nosy like I am. So I think the first of these categories has pretty big books in them. I usually don't keep them on my nonfiction shelf because they're so large. These are books that are pertaining to certain amounts of fiction or media in some way. So yeah, the first of which I can talk about is one, actually you'll be hearing me talk about this a little bit more in my May reading wrap up, because I just finally finished reading it recently. But it is Back to the Future, The Visual History. And this is by Michael Klasserin and Randall Atamanuik. And this is just it's like a coffee table book, basically. It's wicked cool, though. It has a foreword by Michael J. Fox, a preface by Christopher Lloyd, an introduction by Bob Gale, and an afterword by Robert Zemeckis. And it has like such wonderful like photos throughout here, lots of information about the making of all three of the movies or pre that. It also has lots of like things coming out of it, like there's a cover of George McFly's book. There's Marty's letter. It's actually in this envelope, Marty's letter to Doc, 1985. Here's the holographic picture, if you can see it at all, of Marty's siblings disappearing, like they've been erased. Back to the Future is my favorite, like all three of them are my favorite movies of all fucking time. If you've been around here a little bit, you've probably heard me talk about Back to the Future before. I absolutely adore these movies, and we just rewatched them fairly recently, and I just, to me, there's nothing better than Back to the Future. So, I love this book. It's fantastic. I think if you're a casual fan or a super fan like I am, I think you'd love any or all of it. It has lots of interesting information in it. And yeah, I love those extra little bits, and I definitely plan on framing some of them, and I've had this idea in my head of maybe trying to create some kind of collage or shadow box thing with some of the other more bulky or weird little extra pieces that are in here. But yeah, I love this. This is fantastic. If you're really into like coffee table books about like movies and stuff like this is freaking awesome. Speaking of coffee table books about visual things. I also have Doctor Who, The Vault, by Marcus Hearn, and this is a foreword by Stephen Moffat, and this is Treasures from the First 50 Years. It basically is the full and complete story of Doctor Who, the show. I have been very behind in watching it because it's not as easily available to me like it was, and now it is damn near impossible like to get it. Does anyone know if you are in like the UK or something like that, if I got a VPN, would I be able to watch it easier? Because right now it's almost impossible. You have to go on Amazon and it's like fucking $20 an episode or something. It's for the old stuff, not even counting the new stuff. I can't even get to the new stuff. It's terrible. Anyway, that's a rant for another day. But this is following the first 50 years. So it's like from the inception of it. Here's like a map of a stage. You've got the beginnings of everything. And it kind of moves through the years. And then we get into the new stuff, which is what I watched, like Eccleston, Tennant, Smith. Oh my goodness, his name went right out of my head. Yeah, so this is like, again, with the beautiful photos and lots of information. I have not read this one as of yet, but I definitely plan on reading it because, I mean, it's about Doctor Who, and Doctor Who is pretty awesome. And also, I would like to know some more information about the show. I haven't seen much of the original, like, older show, but yeah, if you're really into Doctor Who, this is probably a good one too. And then I've got Rhett and Link's Book of Mythicality by Rhett McLaughlin and Link Neal. This is a field guide to curiosity, creativity, and tomfoolery. I read this a few years ago. This is, of course, if you know Rhett and Link from their Rhett and Link channel, or if you know them from Good Mythical Morning, they have been internet creators here on YouTube for a long time, and this is a silly book that it does talk a lot about their friendship and them and their lives over the years, but it also does have like lots of random silly stuff in between, and if you're fans of them, you would probably absolutely love this. I really enjoyed this when I read this several years ago, and honestly I'd probably like to give it a reread because I just remember this being a lot of fun and also touching in a couple of points too, because they do have this dedicated to one of their best friends who passed away when they were younger, and yeah, so this is just their whole career and their friendship and their lives up until whenever this is published, and lots of silly stuff in between. And then as far as other like media or book related things go, I also have The Legion of Regrettable Supervillains, featuring the 50 strangest supervillains in the history of comics by John Morris. And this does indeed talk about all of the strange supervillains, like the Balloon Maker. What even the hell is that? Satan is also featured at one point in here. Catgirl. Really interesting supervillains that are mostly really bizarre. Quite honestly, it's not something that I probably would have grabbed at any point. I have not collected comics since I was a kid, and I was collecting like Sonic the Hedgehog and Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Like it has been a very long time since then, and quite honestly, I am extremely intimidated by comics. There's just so many and so many different iterations and universes, and it's just extremely overwhelming. I cannot get into the collecting of comics at this juncture. So I got this when I used to get Loot Crate. This came in the Loot Crate. And I probably wouldn't have ever gotten this otherwise, but I'm really glad that I did because this was such a strange and funny book to read. But I think if you do like comics or you've been a fan of them or you collect them, this is probably like even a better read for you because you actually know what most of this is, or some of this is anyway. But I even if I don't get a lot of the context for things, I still remember finding this incredibly amusing. And then I've also got the Sherlock Holmes Handbook, The Methods, Mysteries of the World's Greatest Detective by Ransom Riggs. And this, honestly, I have also not read to completion. This is one of those that I've kind of hopped around and just read little excerpts that are interesting to me. I actually probably should sit down and read the whole thing. But it is really cool. They have different like sections on detective skills. Like this one that I've read, How to Crack a Safe. Or this section on identifying fingerprints and how that's done. Or survival skills, faking your own death, surviving a plunge over a waterfall, how to stage a dramatic entrance, secret societies of the criminal world, how to manage children, how to keep your mind sharp. And I remember there's also a section in here which is how to find a hidden room or passageway, which I remember reading a few times because that has been a lifelong dream of mine, is to find a hidden passage or hidden room, because that would be pretty awesome and also scary. But yeah, this is a really interesting book, and of course you can't take it fully seriously. It does have some factual things in here, but you also have to note that Sherlock Holmes was around in the 1880s, 1890s, so all the information in here, even if it is based within facts, is based within facts of the Victorian period. So yeah. And the last in this category is Stephen King's Danse Macabre. And this is basically Stephen King taking you on, it says, a tour of the dark ballroom of horror, where he's breaking down horror, the genre, and going into all different kinds of horror media to talk about that. And it's a big chunky boy basically talking about the horror genre itself and everything that influenced it. I started reading this last fall and did not get that far into it. It is a little bit more intense than some of his other books. Like, look at the typing. It's so tiny. I know this is a really good reference book. And if you're a fan of horror, if you're like me and you kind of like horror but would like to know more about it, this is probably also good. I guess I can also talk about the couple of books I have on mythology. The first was one of my textbooks from college, because I took a mythology class, which was a lot of fun. And this is, of course, Edith Hamilton's mythology. I think this is like the top book on mythology. Like when people talk about books about mythology, I'm pretty sure this is the one that they talk about. And this is, of course, focusing a lot on Greek mythology, although if I remember correctly, I think there is also a little bit of like Norse information too, but there's a heavy focus on like mythology of the Greeks. And it's chock full of information. The only myth that I really remember actually liking, because it has somewhat of a happy ending as opposed to everything else, was probably the tale of Eros and Psyche, from what I remember. Everything else is pretty terrible, and most of it is Zeus's fault, just saying. If you want more of an introduction, I guess, to mythology before you get into the chunky boys talking about it, or if you have kids that are into mythology or you think should be into mythology, you can't go wrong with Greek Myths by Jean Menzies. She is also a booktuber. She also has another one. I think she also released one on Egypt mythology, which I really would like to read. But yeah, so this one it's first of all, it's beautiful. The art is by Katie Ponder. This is Meet the Heroes, Gods, and Monsters of Ancient Greece. And what I liked about this book, I mean, the art and the information is like really cool. I mean, look at that, it's beautiful. It goes into the gods and goddesses and monsters. But what I really liked about this book also, back of the book, there's more information about the storytelling aspect of the myths. And like different examples, like this information about pots, like how they would and why they would put stuff on there, different stuff about mythical monsters. And then this, which is like things in our society today that are named after these myths. And I thought that was really interesting, like modern tie-in with these, because I know this is like ancient, like this is the land of antiquity, you know, and it's nice to have that like modern tie-in for younger people or for older people, whoever. But this is just a really great introductory to mythology. And I loved it. And yeah, like I said, she also has like an Egyptian one right now that I also would like to get my hands on. Next category, they sort of go together in a manner of speaking. Psychology. So first up, we have The Definitive Book of Body Language. And this is by Alan and Barbara Pease. Just full disclosure, so I have not read this one yet. I am very interested in it. This was one of my friend's textbooks that they were getting rid of, and I was like, I would be interested in that. A breakdown on people's body language and just, and talking about like mirroring, like how, like when you're a kid, it's like a developmental thing that I know they did like social experiments and different things like that on infants and toddlers back in the day, which is really not great that they did that. I mean, on the one hand, hey, now we have all of this information and an understanding about like body language and mirroring and how developmentally children need to be able to read expressions and see things like that to be able to, it was like a whole thing. But it still wasn't great that they did those social experiments because it was not very ethical. Yeah, anyway, that's a whole other thing too. But body language. I find psychology really interesting, and I think for the most part I'm pretty good at reading others' body language and interpreting it. But at the same time, I just find this kind of thing really fascinating, and I'd like to be able to tell a little better if someone is being deceitful, which I don't think I always pick up on, just as like a thing. And also, it's just interesting. Interesting to learn more, you know? And then another one I haven't read is The Gift of Fear, Survival Signals That Protect Us from Violence by Gavin de Becker. This is one that I heard about on a podcast, actually a couple of podcasts now, that have talked about this. And this also has to do with kind of also reading of body language, but it's like reading a situation and picking up on things. Because this guy is like a big public figure protector. Like I think he worked with, he designed the Mosaic Threat Assessment method used to analyze threats to justices of the Supreme Court and members of Congress. He has advised law enforcement and government agencies on predicting violence, and he's just like an expert in that field of trying to predict violence and getting you to get in touch with your internal survival skills. Like he talks about, I haven't read this yet, but I know somewhat of a breakdown of everything is that basically when you get a bad feeling about something and you're trying to dismiss that, it's your body is sending you warning bells and signals because something in like your evolutionary response, you are responding to a particular situation or a particular danger within a situation or around a person, and something on subconscious level is picking up that, hey, this is potentially bad. And it's sending like signals to you like, hey, watch out. And it's basically, instead of dismissing those signals, it's breaking them down and trying to help you figure out what's up with this, why am I feeling this way, and better make an assessment for your own safety, like that kind of thing. So I haven't read this one yet either, but also fascinating because your girl has anxiety, but I'm really interested in like the psychology of it all as well. And then I also have, this is a very dated book. This was actually one that I stole from my parents. I remember I brought it to college and showed everybody, and we amused ourselves for a while with this. It's very dated. It's from the 80s. It's called Psychogeometrics, How to Use Geometric Psychology to Influence People by Susan Dellinger, PhD. I have not looked this woman up. I don't know what her deal is anymore. But it's basically like trying to categorize yourself in certain ways. I believe that when I read this, like, you're a geometric shape. You are, let me see. You are the stubborn box, the intrepid triangle, the erratic rectangle, the gregarious circle, or the flighty squiggle. And I remember, I believe I was a squiggle when I looked at this back in college. It basically gives you an overview of this personality type, their language, appearance, how they are at home, their personal habits, body language, what they're like with families, partners, children, how to deal with them, how to work with them. It's breaking down personality types into these varying shapes. And there's so much about this that is so dated, and I don't know if this is a bunch of fucking hooey or what, but I just remember that when we looked at this in college, we were very entertained by everything. So yeah, I don't know the thought behind this. I haven't touched this since college, basically. I don't know if this is still thought of to be correct psychology or not, but I do know that it's at least funny to think about. And then, not really psychology, but kind of tying in with like life, like the psychology of a good life, or aspects of a good life or something. I don't know. Anyway, we have The Little Book of Hygge, Danish Secrets to Happy Living by Mike Viking. And this guy is the CEO of the Happiness Research Institute in Copenhagen. And this is a little book that basically tells you how to live the hygge life, like they do in Denmark. And this is a charming little book. It has really aesthetically pleasing illustrations, and it breaks down like things to do to live the hygge life. So togetherness, you know, making time with each other, being casual, being comfortable, things you might want in your home. So like a comfortable chair, fireplace, candles, ceramics, books, tactile. Think tactile things. Comfort things. You know, it's basically taking the time with the people you love, or maybe even by yourself if that makes you feel comfortable too, with very tactile things, very calming atmosphere with all your comfort things, and being comfortable, and taking this time out to do nice things, you know, like calming crafts or having a picnic by the beach, or, you know, varying things like that. It's basically trying to live a more happier life, which I am not a self-help kind of girly. A lot of this is probably like meh for me, but I did find it to be very charming, and I think that a lot of the advice in here about trying to make a more comfortable, like, home space is like, I do think that's important. I do think self-care is important. And having that kind of balance of like relaxation, that's very important. So I did like it, and I did find it to be very kind of cute and charming, and have some good advice in it. And then this one, I'm kind of grouping it in with that, but it's just a little weird. It's From Absinthe to Zest. It's by Alexandre Dumas. It's an alphabet for food lovers, and Dumas was kind of a gourmand besides being a prolific writer. And this is basically his guide to varying ingredients, and sometimes including like specific recipes with those ingredients. So from Absinthe to Zest, he also talks about frogs, gingerbread, hazelnuts, melon, nightingale, potato, plum pudding, truffle, turmeric, turnips, vanilla. It's just all kinds of things. It's just a fun, of course, very dated, because some of these dishes are things people wouldn't eat anymore, and some of these things, like, where the fuck do you even get that? Like, really? Are you gonna cook and eat a nightingale? Are you okay? So, yeah, it's just got very interesting things, and Dumas was also really funny, so some of these ingredients are talked about in a really humorous way, and it's just entertaining. It's not like a serious book, so if you just want to spend like a quiet like hour or two just kind of reading about weird or like tasty food for a while, it's not a bad way to spend your afternoon. Speaking of not bad ways to spend your afternoon, we can talk about, I guess, travel. I can talk about travel a little bit. I've got, first of all, some nature-y type books. So the first of which is also really funny. It's The Field Guide to Dumb Birds of North America. This is by Matt Cracked. And I know I talked about this, a couple of years ago. This is a stupid book. It's fucking hilarious. This guy hates birds. So he decided to make a field guide for dumb birds. Belted kingfisher, for example. But he has renamed it the Belted Kingpisser. And says stuff like this. Look at this ridiculous fish-eating bird. Look how big his head is compared to his body. Ha! He kind of reminds me of Luis Guzman, except I like Luis Guzman. Mr. Guzman is a talented and underappreciated actor who can steal a scene with even a small part. Agreed. This bird, on the other hand, eats fish and small amphibians by flying face first into the water from a branch. Hat size, enormous. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. Like Caspian turd. And he just writes the stupidest stuff about these birds, and it's childish and also really fucking hilarious. So, I mean, if you are like me and you like bird watching and you think that's fun, or you just want to laugh, this is freaking great. And I also have A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. This is rediscovering America on the Appalachian Trail. I remember saying at one point my one disappointment was there is a bear on this cover, and there is a severe lack of bears in this story, which, I mean, was pretty good for Bill Bryson. The man was walking and camping on the Appalachian Trail. Appalachian, excuse me. But this was a really interesting book. Basically, Bill Bryson goes on this ill-conceived journey, hiking and camping here and there on the Appalachian Trail with an old college friend, and mishap after mishap, shenanigans, craziness. There's so much silliness and craziness in here, but then there's also serious turns that are taken when talking about hiking on the Appalachian Trail. At the time that they were hiking, there was a famous case of a couple that was murdered on the trail. I know I've heard about it before in true crime podcast episodes. I don't know I can't remember if the case has ever been solved, but he touches on that a little bit in here, because it was happening like right around the same time that he was also in the woods. And then it also talks about how tough it is on the trail, and talks about the environmental impact of people just not caring about nature. And hiking the Appalachian Trail is basically like, you know, it's a personal challenge, but it's also a way of appreciating and spending time getting back, being one with nature, if you will, and appreciating what we have in our land that a lot of people don't seem to give a shit about, but really should. It really talks about like the environmental impact of not caring about nature, and he also talks about like the history of the Appalachian Trail too, as well as just how hard it is to actually hike and camp this. I wondered about the Appalachian Trail. I am not a big hiker, although I do love going into the woods or going on like small hikes when we're on vacation and stuff like that. But if you've ever been curious about the Appalachian Trail, but you don't think you could survive hiking all day and shitting in the woods like a bear, this is probably a good book for that, because you get the experience of learning more about it, but you don't have to actually do it. I also have Sisters of the Earth. This is edited by Lorraine Anderson, and this is a collection of essays by women about nature or concerning their connection with nature. It's not just essays though, there's also poems, there's short stories, and there's excerpts from longer books. This was one of my textbooks in college, but we hadn't read the whole thing, we just read like bits and pieces here and there. And then a few years ago I actually ended up reading the whole thing, and I won't say I loved the entirety of it, but I did feel very connected with different parts of it, and I did really enjoy the diversity of the writing in here, and I really loved it. Let me see, there's who else is in here? Mabel Dodge Luhan, Annie Dillard, Ursula K. Le Guin, Emily Dickinson, Meredith LeSueur, Laura Ingalls Wilder, Terry Tempest Williams, Joy Harjo, Edith Warner, Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, Mae Swenson, Willa Cather, Denise Levertov, Alice Walker, Rachel Carson, Marge Piercy, Adrienne Rich, and I know there's a bunch of other people too, but just very beautiful and very thought-provoking, some of the works in here. Another textbook of mine from college was Animal, Vegetable, Mineral. I think both of these were in my environmental lit class. Yeah, this is Animal, Vegetable, Miracle, A Year of Food Life by Barbara Kingsolver. Barbara Kingsolver, I know, is better known for, I believe, what is it, the Poisonwood Bible? This is the only book of hers that I've read. But this is basically her and her family decided to live a rural life for an entire year. They decided they were only going to buy food raised in their own neighborhood, grown themselves, or learn to live without it. And there's her family. It was basically them living this year of providing all of their food themselves or getting it locally, or just not having it at all. I can't remember much about this book. I think the only thing I really remember from here was her talking about natural pest repellents, and I think it was planting like marigolds, I believe, along the edges of their garden. I know that was something that I made a note of in my brain, because I was like, ooh, that's really good to know, natural repellents, natural like pesticides, like planting certain flowers and plants along the border of your garden that invasive insects don't like. Also, what is it? Spiders don't like it, do they? I should have some marigolds in this house. Fuck spiders. Yeah, that's the only thing I really remember from this. I can't really remember anything else from this book at all. But I have thought it might be fun to revisit it and reread it, especially with the way prices of things are going. We might need to seriously invest in having a garden some point soon. Then I can also talk about my travel type books. So first up we've got Sorry to my nose. My allergies are going crazy and a lot of these books are dusty, so it's not helping. This first one is I Married Adventure, and this is by Osa Johnson. This is about her life with her husband, Martin Johnson, and their travels. They were like wildlife photographers in like, what was it, the 30s? Yeah. Oh wow. She married Martin in 1910, accompanied him on his expeditions until 1937 when he was killed in an airline crash. So long marriage, long life together. This is all about their lives together, their work, their photography. I think there's pictures in here somewhere. Yeah, I haven't read this. There's some pictures. I haven't read this yet, but I've heard it talked about a few times, and this just seemed really interesting. So next up is this travel guide to London. It's Eyewitness Travel Guides, and I have read this one. Even though it's hard to like read it, because it is just a travel guide. It has like all these different kinds of things, like different restaurants you can go to, the British Museum, like different stuff like that. I found this randomly in Savers like several years ago and was so fucking excited to find it, because normally these can get kind of pricey when you're buying them at like a Barnes and Noble, and I got this for like, I don't know, $4 or something. So but yeah, it's just your basic travel guide to London if you've ever wanted to go, which I have. So I found that to be really fascinating, even though, like I said, it's kind of a hard read. There's just like little bits of information things, but I definitely read it cover to cover because I was like, this is fucking cool. Next up is Victoria Mansion by Thomas B. Johnson and Timothy Broshnahan. And this was just a little informational book. It's mostly pictures and little bits of information about the family that, the two families that built and then lived in the Victoria Mansion, which is this really beautiful mansion in Portland, Maine, that we visited last year, my husband and I. And it's just really cool. So it has everything about like the building of the place, the families that inhabited it, the people, the staff that worked there, and then it also has information about the restoration process, which is really interesting, really cool pictures and stuff. So if you like old architecture, like I'm super into old architecture and stuff, it's interesting in that aspect, and just this house itself and the people that lived and worked there are also really interesting. So it's just a very short but kind of fun little book. And then Very New Orleans, A Celebration of History, Culture, and Cajun Country Charm by Diana Hollingsworth Gassler. And this is also a really aesthetically pleasing little book that it talks about different parts of New Orleans, hotels, famous authors that hung out there, different areas of the place, things to see, restaurants. It also has lots of maps. The artwork in here is so aesthetically pleasing and cute. I also really love that you get a little bit of history stuff and like the people that made New Orleans what it is, and lots of restaurants and things like that. But then you also get really random like culture tidbits and things that you might not always see in different like travel guides. So it's really just a beautiful little interesting book about New Orleans. Then I've got Perfume from Provence, and this is by Lady Winifred Fortescue, and this is basically about Lady Fortescue and her husband, the time that I think her husband, what was it? He was in, shit, I can't remember what he was in, but he was in some kind of thing, and they ended up moving to France, and provincial France, to Provence. and buying a home there, fixing it up, and living there. Basically, they were there and then they were out of there during part of World War II. But then they ended up coming back later on, and it's just about like life in Provence, what life was like in rural France at that time in like the 30s and 40s. And at times it's very charming and funny, and at other times it's very eye rolling. I know that I talked about this, was it last year maybe? Parts of it are charming, little bits and pieces are funny, but a lot of it is very like hoity-toity rich British lady complaining about rural French people, which is a very eye-rolling experience to read quite a bit of it. Like I'm sorry that it's so difficult for you to, you know, have to deal with not having all the amenities that you're used to in England, my God. But whatever. If you're interested in that kind of time period, or you want to read about people moving, that's something that I love, is people moving to the country, or reading about people living in the country or moving to the country. Is like a subgenre that I really enjoy. So yeah, it's fun but also annoying slightly. And then there is Abroad in Japan. 10 Years in the Land of the Rising Sun, and this is by Chris Broad. He is also another YouTuber. He is an expat. Well, he's not really an expat, is he? Because he's still technically British, but he's been living in Japan for the past 10, or what's like, what, 11 years at this point. And this is about his time there. He started out as just looking for like an adventure and wanting to see Japan, and he went there through the educational program, like to teach English to students, to Japanese students, and then he ended up you know, on the side starting a YouTube channel to kind of like just document his experiences, and also talk about like some of the funny or interesting like things that he was still trying to wrap his mind about, deal with like the culture shock and everything, and it became like his thing. And he's paired up different times with like the travel, like the tourism industry of Japan, and everything. And this just talks about his experience living in Japan. A lot of it honestly is about that first like year or so that he was in Japan, with the teaching and getting used to everything, and then making his friends that he has. But it does talk about like some other experiences in Japan. He talks about varying places he has, things he's experienced, different culture shock aspects, or different things about what it's like to be a foreigner living in Japan. And it's just so heartwarming and charming and really interesting, and he's also like so funny, so it's just a very entertaining book, especially if you are a fan of him and his channel, or if you are a fan of Japan and you'd really like to travel to Japan. Is also like really interesting to read about that as well. These last two in the travel section also kind of tie into my other section a little bit, slightly, because they're like travel, but they're also like history related, and they are the Sea Hunters books by Clive Cussler and Craig Durgo. So we have the Sea Hunters, and this is True Adventures with Famous Shipwrecks, and this is basically Clive Cussler, who wrote the Dirk Pitt novels, among other things. The organization, the government organization that Dirk Pitt and several other characters work for within a lot of those novels is NUMA, the National Underwater and Marine Agency. And they do a lot of different things. There's like scientists involved with like environmental aspects of things, and marine biology and etc. But then you also have like underwater archaeology and different things like that, like looking for shipwrecks or structures underwater, and there's a lot going on at Numa. Well, Clive Cussler ended up making an actual Numa, and the purpose of this particular organization, I don't know if they're still in operation or not since he's passed, but their job basically is locating shipwrecks and documenting them, basically. And so this was volume 1 of him finding these shipwrecks with the crew, and yeah, documenting everything. And then, so I've read this before, but I'd like to do a reread of it. And then this one is The Sea Hunters 2, so it's more continuing adventures of that. You see how much time went by between book 1 and book 2. But yeah, what's interesting about this is that he will go into the search for and then the finding of the shipwreck, but he also starts out at documenting in a narrative kind of way what happened to cause this ship to go down or be on the ocean or river floor or wherever it happens to be, which ties in very nice with his novels, because he usually has like a past thing that happens that ties into the rest of the adventure later on. So these are fun if you like Clive Cussler's writing and you want nonfiction by him. That's really entertaining, which ties into this last few books here, which are history related or politics related. First up, we'll talk about the history related things. I have 2 books by Jeff Shara here. And the first is Rise to Rebellion, which I read several years ago, and this is a novel of the American Revolution, and this basically goes from pre-Revolutionary War to, where does it stop? I think it stops right after the Declaration of Independence is written, if I remember correctly. So it's like the first section is like the rise to literally the rise to rebellion. So like everything leading up to then, and then the official start of like the Revolutionary War. And then this one I have not read yet. It is book 2, The Glorious Cause, which is the Revolutionary War. It's like all about the war itself and everything. And what I remember finding really entertaining about this was that he writes this not like a textbook, he writes it like a historical fiction novel, but it's based within fact. So he does, I think, take some liberties here and there with like maybe some inner thoughts or like words actually, sentences actually used by varying people within here, like Paul Revere, Ben Franklin, John Adams, Abigail Adams, George Washington, Sam Adams. He's taking some liberties here and there, but it does seem to be largely based within fact of what we know from things that happened, and also, journals and letters, varying amounts of correspondence and things that people would keep back in the days. Has used as like a basis for a lot of these interactions or things that he's writing about. So it's really interesting because it's written like a historical fiction novel, but it is actually a historical novel. He's taken some slight liberties with conversations and things in here, but so it's really interesting. So I would like to reread this at some point and then dive into book 2. Because I find the Revolutionary War to be really fascinating. And then I don't know where I put them, but I do have 2 books about Alexander Hamilton. I can't find them, but one is Alexander Hamilton, which is like his full fucking biography. It's a very chunky boy. and it's by Ron Chernow, and that is what Lin-Manuel Miranda was reading when he created Hamilton. He was inspired to create the musical Hamilton. And then there's also Alexander Hamilton Revolutionary, which I believe is just basically focusing in on leading up to the revolution and then during the Revolutionary War, focusing on him, and that is by Margaret Brockenbrough. I have not read either of them because that first one is rather chunky, and they both definitely read like textbooks. So it's just a little bit more of a weighty task. Speaking of revolutionary times, then I've also got 2 books by Thomas Paine. We have Common Sense, which is his first, it's like a pamphlet that was basically given out to bolster the morale of like the soldiers, basically everyone, like George Washington's army, and also to bolster the colonists in the fact of, hey, this revolution's got to happen. We can't go on like this anymore. So I read this a couple of years ago. As you can see, I tabbed a lot of shit that I was like, oh damn, this is pretty great. So I had read this before. I had read this back in high school and had really found it thought-provoking and liked it. Thomas Paine was such an interesting writer, an interesting person. I'd honestly like to learn a little bit more about him. But Common Sense there. And then there's also Rights of Man, which I have not read yet. It's basically speaking on behalf of democracy, equality, and Europe. It's basically talking about the French Revolution in the first part, and part 2 is basically more work on social reforms and things. Basically, when was this? 1791, so this is getting into like the beginning parts of our country actually being a country, and different things like that. So I have not read this one yet, but I would like to get it. It's just, these are those books that it's like, it's hard to sit down and actually read cover to cover at that time. It's one of those where you kind of need to pick your way through them, because the language, even though it's written in common language for the time, wasn't very highfalutin. It's definitely a different way than how we express ourselves now, so it does take a little bit more time to kind of get through it. And then I also have a copy of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, Bill of Rights amendments, and other like historical documents. But yeah, it also has the brief histories of the Founding Fathers too. So I have read these documents before. It's just been a while. That was like back in high school. So I wanted my own copies. So yeah, I would like to, maybe around the time that I'm reading Rights of Man, maybe I'll take a deep dive into this stuff too, and I'll remind myself of things. Since some people need to be reminded of things, apparently. Speaking of Alexander Hamilton, we have the Federalist, which is basically the Federalist Papers. So this is Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay's essays defending the Constitution, or the making of the Constitution. Basically, this is the part of the song Nonstop from Hamilton, when it says they were supposed to write 25 essays, work divided evenly between the 3 men. In the end, they wrote 85 essays in the span of 6 months. John Jay got sick after writing 5. James Madison wrote 29. Hamilton wrote the other 51. So, obviously, he's on the cover of this. So I decided that, fuck it. I wanted to read, I've been kind of on the fence about wanting to read these for a while, and then I decided, you know what, fuck it, I do want to read these at some point. This is another one, obviously, that I can't really, like, sit and read cover to cover, but it's one that's like, oh, that would be nice to pick through here and there. when I have some time or when I've got the brain power for it. And then this one I kind of have in here because it's kind of political. It's a social, it's a society, it's a book about society and our country. It's a little bit political. It talks a little bit about history, I believe. I have not read this one either yet, but it is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and this is a book that is basically, I think it's all letters, like him writing letters to his son about what it's like to be a black man in America currently, and what it has been like being a black man in America. This is one, I meant to read this last year, but I was not doing well last year, you guys. So I do hope to get to this one sometime this year too. I don't think it will be summer, but maybe towards the end of the year. So yeah, basically that was my miscellaneous section of books. Lots of different things here. Lots of different books, random things. Let me know if you guys found any of that interesting, if you have read any of these, if you're interested in reading any of these. Let me know too if there are any that you saw on here and you're like, oh hey Jen, you should also check out such and such or whatever. Just let me know. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy this another step down the tour of my nonfiction books. Like I said, I have one more section of nonfiction that I haven't made up my mind if I'm going to talk about. It is my spirituality books, which I don't know if I want to talk about them or not. I'm kind of on the fence about it. This might be it for the nonfiction tour, unless I do decide, yeah, maybe we'll talk about that other stuff too. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for always watching. And if you're new here and would like to subscribe, please indeed do so. And I will see you guys next time.